This is an instructional video for the Entrelac Balaclava where we are starting Tier 1 on the wrong side. After working the setup base triangle section, we will continue working flat back and forth with Tier 1. We are changing to color 3 and getting ready to work a wrong side row. Turn your work so the wrong side is facing you and purl front to back in the first stitch on your left needle. This will create an increase of 1 stitch. There should be 2 stitches of color 3 on your needle. Turn your work, knit 1 stitch, and slip the last stitch as if to purl with the yarn and back. Turn your work, purl front to back in the first stitch from your left needle, increasing 1 stitch, and then purl 2 stitches together. 1 stitch will be of color 3 and 1 stitch will be color 2. You should now have 3 stitches of color 3 on your needle. Turn your work, knit 2 stitches, and slip the last stitch as if to purl with the yarn and back. Turn your work, purl front to back on the first stitch, increasing 1 stitch. Purl 1 stitch, and purl the next 2 stitches together. You should have 4 stitches of color 3 on your needle. Turn your work, knit 3 stitches, slip the last stitch as if to purl with the yarn and back. Turn your work, purl front to back on the first stitch, increasing 1 stitch. Purl 2 stitches, and purl the next 2 stitches together. You should have 5 stitches of color 3 on your needle. Turn your work, knit 4 stitches, and slip the last stitch as if to purl with your yarn and back. Continue following the instructions as written and check back in for row 15. Once you've completed row 14, you will see you have 1 stitch left of color 2. We are not going to be purling front to back on row 15. Simply purl 7 stitches and purl 2 stitches together. You should have 8 stitches of color 3 on your needles with a nice clean edge on the left side, and we'll begin picking up stitches from our clean edge created in the previous row. We've completed our first wrong side edge triangle, and it's time to pick up stitches from the previous base triangle row. It's important to turn the work around so the right side is facing. Using a crochet hook, we will pick up 1 stitch for every edge stitch of the previous base triangle. Wrap the yarn around the crochet hook, pull it through the edge stitch, and place it back on the left needle. Continue this process of picking up and knitting 1 stitch for every edge stitch in the base triangle row until you have 8 new stitches on your left needle. Grabbing the last stitch gets a little tricky, so I do ditch the crochet hook and switch to my needle to be able to pick up what I need to close this gap. I will be showing the same section without using a crochet hook, so you will just be picking up and knitting using your knitting needles. Once you've picked up that 8th stitch, you'll see that you have 8 stitches from that edge triangle and 8 new stitches lining the edge of your base triangle from the previous row. From here, you will knit 7 stitches and slip the last stitch as if to purl with the yarn and back. Note that depending on how you picked up your stitches and placed them back on your left needle, you might have to knit through the back loop in order to not twist the stitches below. Turn your work, purl 7 stitches, and purl 2 stitches together. 1 stitch will be of color 3, and 1 stitch will be color 2 from the row below. Turn your work, knit 7 stitches, and slip the last stitch as if to purl with the yarn and back. Turn your work, purl 7 stitches, and purl 2 stitches together. Continue this process of knitting 7, slipping the last stitch on the right side, turning your work, purling 7 and purling 2 together on the wrong side until you've purled 2 together all the way across the base triangle. should now have two right-leaning rectangles on your left needle. We will continue to pick up and knit 8 stitches along the edge from the previous row, 1 stitch for every edge stitch. In this example, I will show you how I use my knitting needle to pick up and knit stitches. I insert the tip of my right needle into the edge stitch below, wrap the yarn around, and pull through. On the next edge stitch, once I've inserted my right needle tip, I then use the left needle to kind of help open it up and get that stitch knit through. Now I'm going to work the edge triangle on the right side. After you have picked up and knit 8 stitches along that last edge, you will knit 7 and slip 1 stitch as if to purl with the yarn held in back. Turn your work, purl 6 stitches, and purl the last 2 stitches together, decreasing 1 stitch. Turn your work, knit 6 stitches, slip 1 stitch as if to purl with your yarn in back. Turn your work, purl to the last 2 stitches, purl 2 together, decreasing 1 stitch. Continue following to row 14, where you will be left with 1 stitch remaining on your needle. You should only have one stitch remaining after completing that edge triangle on the right side, and you're now ready to continue to Tier 2 instructions.